Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 20 tight end rankings and tiers for the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my 2023 top 20 tight end rankings and tiers. So we begin with tier number 1. There is only one tight end in this tier, and that is Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs, current underdog ADP, tight end number 1 at pick 6.3. Last year was the tight end number 1 in half PPR as well as half PPR points per game, playing in 17 games, having 152 targets, 8.9 per game, ranking number 1 at tight end, 110 receptions, 6.5 per game, number 1, 1,338 receiving yards, 78.7 per game, number 1, and 12 total touchdowns, number 1 at tight end. So number 1 in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. He was 4th in dominator rating, 1st in yards per team pass attempt, and 2nd in yards per route run. Travis Kelce remains to be the number 1 pass catcher in this offense. Obviously, they have other wide receivers, but Travis Kelce is still the number 1 guy. He is a touchdown monster on one of the best offenses in the NFL with probably the best quarterback in the NFL. So Travis Kelce is set for yet another huge season. The only argument against Travis Kelce is that he's getting a little bit old, but I won't hear any of that. Travis Kelce is in a tier of his own, the clear tight end number 1 and worth a first-round pick in fantasy football drafts. Moving to tier number 2, we just have one guy in this tier as well. That is Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens, current underdog ADP, tight end number 2 at pick 32.2, tight end number 4 in half PPR, and tight end number 3 in half PPR points per game, playing in 15 games last season in 2022. Despite the fact that Lamar did miss some time, Mark Andrews still had 113 targets, 7.5 per game, ranking 3rd at tight end, 73 receptions, 4.9 per game. Number 3, 847 receiving yards, 56.5 per game. Number 3 at tight end, and 5 total touchdowns. Number 8, he was 2nd in dominator rating, 4th in yards per route run, and 2nd in yards per team pass attempt. Now, the Baltimore Ravens this offseason did bring in some new pass catchers. They drafted Zay Flowers, and they brought in Odell Beckham Jr. Now, despite the fact that now they kind of have a trio at wide receiver, including Rashad Bateman, and they are going to give some targets to J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews is still the guy in the red zone, and Lamar Jackson very clearly heavily believes in Mark Andrews, and even with the addition of these other weapons onto the team, I still have very strong beliefs that Mark Andrews is the key piece in this offense. Besides Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews is the number 1 key piece in this offense. I think that Lamar Jackson is going to get Mark Andrews very involved in a lot of games. This is a Baltimore Ravens offense that I suspect is going to be scoring a shitload of points game in and game out if Lamar is able to stay healthy. So I'm a big fan of Mark Andrews this year. Now we're going to move to tier number 3, and you might want to have a little bit of a debate here. You might say that you like Hockenson more, or you might say you like George Kittle more, and some might even say that George Kittle might belong in tier number 2, or TJ Hockenson might belong in tier number 2 with Mark Andrews. TJ Hockenson, number 3 of the Minnesota Vikings, underdog ADP, tight end 3 at pick 48.1, finished the year as the tight end 2.5 PPR. He was the tight end 4 in points per game, 17 games played in 2022, partially on the Lions and then partially on the Vikings, 129 targets, 7.6 per game, number 2, 86 receptions, 5.1 per game, number 2, 914 receiving yards, 53.8 per game, number 2, and 6 total touchdowns. His efficiency stats aren't really the best, 19% dominator rating, 12th, but ultimately, this is another great offense. While the Minnesota Vikings look to build upon the defense that was absolute dog shit last season, their defense is still incredibly bad, and they are now an offense that is uber pass heavy. I understand they have Justin Jefferson, but TJ Hockenson again, just like Mark Andrews, is still a very key piece in his offense. I know people make fun of Kirk Cousins, but it doesn't take the second coming of Patrick Mahomes to throw the ball to TJ Hawkinson. This is a Vikings offense that I expect to be electric yet again. The NFC is about as soft as baby shit. And again, the Vikings defense is bad still, so they're going to have to throw a lot late in games. Closing out tier number 3, we have George Kittle me Timbers, tight end of the San Francisco 49ers. Underdog ADP, tight end number 4 at pick 55.7. Tight end 3.5 PPR last year. Tight end number 2 in points per game, playing in 15 games on the season. 86 targets, 5.7 per game, number 10. 60 receptions, 4 per game, number 7. 765 receiving yards, 51 per game, number 5. And 11 tugs, number 2 at tight end. He only had one drop last season, a 30.6% dominator rating first, 12.8 yards per reception fifth, and 1.66 yards per team pass attempt fourth. Now, my ranking of George Kittle is likely going to change as we get deeper and deeper in the offseason, because if we get closer to week number 1, when a lot of people are drafting their fantasy football teams, and it turns out that big cock Brock Purdy is going to be the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, then I'm going to start banging the drum in favor of George Kittle. But we find out that it's going to be Trey Lance. Trey Lance has been taking the first team reps in OTAs right now, then I'm a little bit more worried about George Kittle. Now, do I think that Trey Lance is a flaming pile of dog shit? No. But do I think that Trey Lance is the best quarterback for George Kittle? No. We watched it last year. It's very clear that if Brock Purdy is good to go, and if he is the guy early on in the season, that is going to be a huge boost for George Kittle. Moving now to tier number 4, beginning with Darren Waller of the New York Football Giants, current underdog ADP tight end 7 at pick 80.4. Last year, he was the tight end number 28.5 PPR and the tight end number 10 in half PPR points per game. Playing in 9 games for the Las Vegas Raiders, he had 43 targets, 4.8 per game, number 31, 28 receptions, 3.1 per game, 35th, 388 receiving yards, 43.1 per game, 27th, and 3 touchdowns, 20th. He was 5th in yards per target and 3rd in yards per reception. Now, obviously, Darren Waller isn't necessarily the most healthy guy on earth, right? It seems like year in and year out, he gets banged up. But when I'm drafting my fantasy football team, especially later in drafts, right, Darren Waller isn't going at pick 40. He's going at pick 80.4. And at that point, I am willing to take the risk on Waller because I think he is an exceptional tight end. He has incredible hands. And he is in a situation on the Giants where he might legitimately be the most skilled pass catcher on that team. It might be him and Saquon. Now, they draft Jalen Hyatt, they have Wan'Dale Robinson, Isaiah Hodgins, but Darren Waller could legitimately become the number 1 target in this Giants offense. I am a big believer of Darren Waller this year. I know some might say, Nick, you ranked him a little bit too high, but I really do believe that Waller belongs in a tier with Goddard as well as Kyle Pitts. Speaking of Goddard, my tight end number 6, underdog ADP, tight end number 6 at pick 68.7. Tight end number 12 in half PPR, tight end 5 in points per game, playing in 12 games last season, 68 targets, one off of being very nice, I like, with 69, 5.7 per game, number 15, 55 receptions, 4.6 per game, number 12, 702 receiving yards, 58.5 per game, number 7, and 3 total touchdowns, 20th, 10.3 yards per target, first, yards per reception with 12.8, fourth, and 1.8 yards per team pass attempt, third. Now, I understand the Philadelphia Eagles have a loaded offense. They have A.J. Brown, they have Devontae Smith, and they have Dallas Goedert. A lot of people don't give Jalen Hurts the credit that he has earned. Now, people will talk about his rushing upside, which obviously is great for fantasy football, but Jalen Hurts is also a pretty exquisite passer, in my opinion. He's a lot better at passing than most motherfuckers tend to give this guy the credit for. Dallas Goedert is a red zone threat, only scored 3 touchdowns last year, but I think that could be on the up and up in 2023. Again, I expect this to be a very good team yet again, so I think Dallas Goedert slots just fine as tight end number 6. If you want to make him tight end number 5, then go right ahead. At tight end number 7, to close out tier number 4, we have Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons, current underdog ADP, tight end number 5 at pick 64.3. But before we talk about Kyle Pitts a little bit more in depth, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play best ball fantasy football this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, let me explain it to you real quick. Best ball is the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that is it. You do an 18-round draft, and at the end of the season, your team will automatically be updated weekly with the highest scores being put into your lineup. So you don't have to worry about the in-season management. There's no trades, and there is no waiver wire. So you just draft your team, you forget about it, and you can come back at the end of the season and win a boatload of money. $3 million to their biggest contest for first place. $15 million in total prizes, just $25 to enter. If you use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, you will get a 100% first match deposit bonus of up to $100. So if you're brand new, click on the link, use promo code Notorious. You can either do it on the website or on their app. If you deposit $100, they give you an additional $100, $50, you get an additional $50, $25, you get an additional $25. Make sure you guys check it out as the summer goes along. We're going to be doing drafts all the time on there. Also, probably going to be live streams so you guys can join in with me. Again, make sure you guys check that out, link in the video description. And again, when I do these type of sponsorships, I only go with websites that I actually use, companies that I support, and I love drafting on Underdog Fantasy. I've already done a ton of drafts on there. So Kyle Pitts, Atlanta Falcons, tight end 5 at pick 64.3. Tight end 33 last season and 20 in points per game. 10 games played, 59 targets, 5.9 per game, 24th. 28 receptions, 2.8 per game, 35th. 356 receiving yards, 35.6 per game, 30th. And 2 total touchdowns, 32nd. 18.7% dominator rating, 13th. 12.7 yards per reception, 7th. He only had 1 drop, which is pretty solid, and 1.58 yards per team pass attempt, 5th. Now, how many years in a row are we going to take Kyle Pitts highly in fantasy drafts before we finally stop doing it? Now, I get picking him at pick 64.3 because that seems like a fair price. It's not like you have to pay this crazy draft capital. It's not like people are expecting Kyle Pitts to necessarily be the next Kelsey, the next Andrews at this point in his career. And I think Kyle Pitts is severely handicapped by the head coach Arthur Smith and the quarterback play of the Atlanta Falcons. Let's call a spade a fucking spade. No one wants to have the pass catchers on a team with Desmond Ridder as their starting quarterback with Arthur Smith as the head coach, because this is a team that wants to run the rock with efficiency. Now, do I think that Desmond Ridder is going to be better in 2023 compared to last year? Yes, but I also don't want to sit here and just be delusional and pretend like things are all fine and dandy with Kyle Pitts, because he hasn't proved it to me yet at the NFL level. Sure, he's been decent. Like, I'm not saying he's just this flaming pile of shit. I just don't really trust him, if I'm being honest with you, and I don't know how many drafts I'm going to draft him in, considering I like Waller and Goddard ahead of him. Moving now to tier number 5. This is a bigger tier at the tight end position. Tight ends 8 through 12. At number 8, we got Easy Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Underdog ADP, tight end number 8 at pick 12.5. Last year finished the season, surprisingly, as tight end number 6 and tight end number 8 in points per game. Now, the biggest joke about Evan Ingram is actually that this motherfucker has butter for fingers. He drops everything. It was such a big joke when he was a Giant. They'd throw the ball and he would just drop it. And then even early on in training camp, we'd hear like, oh, there was a bunch of throws by Trevor Lawrence looking incredible, but he had 3 incompletions and they were all drops from Evan Ingram. And it's like, wow, same shit, different day. But it seems like he turned the page during the season. 17 games played with 14 starts, 98 targets, 5.8 per game. 5th at tight end, 73 receptions, 4.3 per game. Number 3, 766 receiving yards, 45.1 per game. Number 4, and 4 total touchdowns, 5.3 per game. That's just not correct. 4 touchdowns, but not 5.3 touchdowns per game. It's a 5.3%. 12th at tight end. Maybe, just maybe, I just had this thought, I had an epiphany, that maybe Tim Tebow, when he showed up to the Jacksonville Jaguars, blessed Evan Ingram. 89% true catch rate, 12th, 2.15 target separation, 10th, and 3.64 average cushion, 5th. Actually doesn't make sense either, so maybe Tim Tebow just blessed the tight end position forever for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they add Calvin Ridley, which pushes Evan Ingram out of tier number 4. Like, there's a lot of target competition. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. They obviously have Travis Etienne. They have Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. They have Zay Jones. They also have Tank Bigsby. So they got a lot of weapons there in Jacksonville. Again, I'm not saying that's going to make Evan Ingram not valuable because he's still my tight end number 8, so I still like him a ton. But the addition of Ridley, obviously, I don't think helps Evan Ingram, to be honest with you. The next guy in tier number 5 is Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. Underdog ADP, tight end 12 at pick 130.4. I am very adamantly a Dalton Schultz truther. Tight end 10.5 PPR last year in Dallas. Tight end 11 in points per game. 15 games played, 89 targets, 5.9 per game. Number 7 at tight end. 57 receptions, 3.8 per game. Number 11. 577 receiving yards, 38.5 per game. Number 10. And 5 total touchdowns. 8th. He was 16th in Dominator rating last season. This is another guy that I wouldn't be shocked if he was one of the best pass catchers on his team, right? They have Nico Collins. They have John Mechie. They draft Tank Dell. But ultimately, Dalton Schultz has proved up to us, at least over the last couple of years, that he is a great pass catcher and is a worthy opponent for fantasy football, right? He's a worthy draft pick. I shouldn't have really said opponent, but you get it, right? If you're playing up against Dalton Schultz in fantasy football, I'm not thinking that Dalton Schultz is going to score 3 points. I'm thinking Dalton Schultz has the upside to score 15, 20 points. This is a guy that could be getting 6, 7, 8 targets per game potentially in Houston, especially if having that young rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud, maybe he just wants to pepper the big bastard on the team, right? Just throw it to the huge guy. A little bit safer, he's not going to be 30 yards down the field. It's not like CJ Stroud has to do a 360 and throw it deep down the field for Schultz to be successful. So I think even with the younger quarterback, I think that even gives Dalton Schultz a little bit of a leg up. I've been drafting him a ton on Underdog Fantasy already. I'm going to continue to do so. Tight end number 10, we got David Njoku, the chief of the Cleveland Browns. Underdog ADP, tight end 9, pick 102.2. Tight end 13 last year and 9 in points per game. 14 games played, 80 targets, 5.7 per game. Number 11, 58 receptions, 4.1 per game. 8th, 628 receiving yards, 44.9 per game, 8th, and 4 total touchdowns, 12th, with a 21.9% Dominator rating, ranking 7th. David Njoku is another one of these players where people are going to be either very high or very low on David Njoku, in my opinion, because I think some people still have that perception that Deshaun Watson is awful. That wasn't just a fluke. He wasn't just rusty. Deshaun Watson lost all of that upside. He lost all of the juice and he's drained. Maybe that is true, but I've seen a lot of clips out of OTAs. I'm not saying OTAs is proof, guaranteed, that Watson's going to be back to normal, but would anyone be shocked realistically if Deshaun Watson ended up as a top 5 quarterback in QBR last year? He looks great in fantasy football too. It should not shock really anyone. David Njoku has dealt with a lot of pretty bad quarterback play his whole career. He hasn't really been that top 5 fantasy football tight end, but I think in Cleveland now with a second year of Deshaun Watson where he's going into the year 100% ready, not rusty, played those couple of games, took a shit on the field, but I think he's going to bounce back, and I think David Njoku is going to be a big benefactor of that. At number 11, we have a guy that also has some worries. Some people say this guy might be a one-year wonder. Chig Okonkwo, Tennessee Titans tight end, underdog ADP, tight end 13 at pick 130.9, tight end 23.5 PPR, 28 in points per game. 17 games played last year, but he only had 8 starts, 46 targets, 2.7 per game, 30th, 32 receptions, 1.9 per game, 29th, 450 receiving yards, 26.5 per game, 20th, and 3 total touchdowns, 20th. So the fact that he technically played in 17 games but wasn't really doing all that much kind of skews the per game stats by a wide margin, because when he was actually getting the work, he was a very valuable fantasy asset. If you guys remember back to last season, 3.27 yards per out run first, 9.8 yards per target second, 14.1 yards per reception first. This is another team where the quarterback situation is pretty dicey. Definitely way more dicey than the Browns because they've got Ryan Tannehill and they have Mayo Boy, who they just drafted, Will Levis, out of Kentucky. So I think Chig, realistically, if you're trying to order the receivers on the Tennessee Titans, it's pretty clearly that Treylon Burks is number 1, and then Okonkwo Chig is going to be number 2. Let's be honest, right? I don't want to say let's call a spade because I say that like a million times in the video, but let's be honest. Let's just be real. This is a team that doesn't have a lot of great pass catching weapons. So even if you might think this is like a one-year wonder type deal, who else are they going to throw the ball to? Like, realistically, think about that. Who else are they going to throw the ball to? You probably can't even think of another name. So, to me, it's pretty clear that Chig is going to be pretty involved in Tennessee. To close out tier number 5, we have Pat Fryermuth of the Steelers. Our dog ADP, tight end 10 at pick 109.2. Tight end 8 last year in half PPR, tight end 13 in points per game. Playing in 16 games last year with 8 starts, 98 targets, 6.1 per game, number 5, 63 receptions, 3.9 per game, number 6, 732 receiving yards, 45.8 per game, number 6, 2 total touchdowns, 32nd, 21.8% dominator rating, 8th, 13th in yards per reception, 9th in yards per team pass attempt. Realistically, this offense has a lot of skill. I know not a lot of people love Deontay Johnson. People seem to really love George Pickens. They have Fryermuth. Bring in the corpse of Allen Robinson, and then they have Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. So they have a pretty solid core. Problem is, Kenny Pickett isn't the best, and their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, should be deported out of the fucking country because he has no idea what he's doing. And I just have to assume he's from Canada because that's his last name. Send him back to Ontario. That sorry bastard has no idea what he's doing. I think that Pat Fryermuth is in for a pretty decent season. They draft Darnell Washington, but mostly to be used as like a blocker, but that takes Pat Fryermuth off the field unless they're running a lot of 2 tight end sets. Shout out to Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. Now we move to tier number 6, beginning at player number 13 at the tight end position, Cole Kmet of the Bears. Underdog ADP, tight end 14, pick 138.9. This is another team that added a tight end in the offseason. They bring in Robert Tonyan. Now, I've been a Robert Tonyan truther in the past. I still think Kmet's the guy, but that obviously isn't super favorable if Tonyan's able to stay healthy. I think you're going to see Tonyan on the field a bunch. Tight end 7.5 PPR, 14 in points per game for Kmet last season. 17 games played, 69 targets. Very nice. I like. Number 13 at tight end, 4.1 per game, 50 receptions, 2.9 per game, 15th, 544 receiving yards, 32 per game, 13th, 7 total touchdowns, 4th, very dominant, 28.9% dominator rating, put that guy in the 50 Shades of Grey films, 3rd, and 100% true catch rate, 3rd. Again, Cole Kmet's a good player, then bringing in Tonyan, puts not a full stop, but pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. I'm not willing to slam on the brakes, but I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. I'm a little nervous. At number 14, we got a Chicago Bears division NFC North rival, the Detroit Lions tight end, Sam Laporta, tight end of the Detroit Lions. Underdog ADP, tight end 19, pick 160.7, pick 34 in the 2023 NFL Draft, played 4 years at Iowa, at 21 years old in 2022, 12 games played, 58 receptions on 94 targets for 656 yards, 11.3 YPR, yards per reception, 27% target share, 61.7% catch rate, 1 touchdown. 91st, sound like fucking Mike Tyson. 91st percentile 40-yard dash with a 4.59. 85th percentile speed score with 108.4 on Player Profiler. Had a breakout season in 2021, and he had 30 broken tackles on 111 catches in his last 2 years, 2021 and 2022. Now, the suspension of Jameson Williams makes me even a little bit more excited for the involvement of Laporta early on in the season. I know Jared Goff wasn't necessarily force-feeding Hawkinson the rock a bunch last season when he was on the team, but they bring in an Iowa boy. We all know that tight end U is Iowa University. They breed these corn-fed boys, and they are ready to rock. I think that Sam Laporta, I almost said Sam Darnold. Jeez, Sam Laporta doesn't have mono. Hopefully not at least. Sam Laporta looks to be in a very good spot. He was shining like a diamond in rookie minicamp. There was a lot of positive news about him. I'm all aboard the Sam Laporta train, baby. Problem is I can't rank him any higher because rookie tight ends typically aren't the best in fantasy football, but I really like his role in Detroit, which I think is a pretty underrated offense. Next guy in tier number 6, Tyler Higbee of the Rams. Underdog ADP, tight end 16, pick 148.9. Tight end 9 last year, 18 in points per game, playing in all 17 games. He had 108 targets, 6.4 per game, 4th. 72 receptions, 4.2 per game, 5th. 620 receiving yards, 36.5 per game, 9th. 3 total touchdowns, 20th. 14th in dominator rating, 4th in target share, 6th in target rate. Obviously, Stafford got hurt part of the way through last season. Kupp gets hurt. This offense goes from like 2021 where like they're this fucking wrecking machine to a limp dick offense. Let's be honest, like when Baker is playing quarterback, John Wolford. Like, come on, it's not going to be great. So if Stafford's able to stay healthy, I have high hopes for Higbee, but I've kind of made this a point in the quarterback rankings video and tier list video from yesterday that, hey, while I like Stafford the player, I worry about his health. And I worry that this offense is kind of on a downward spiral. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be the worst offense in the NFL. It's pretty easy. There's going to be some teams that are really fucking bad, and it's not going to be the Rams. I don't think they're going to be one of the worst offenses. They have Cooper Kupp after all. But let's be honest. Like, do we think that Higbee, like, you think this offense is going to have enough firepower to score 8 touchdowns for Higbee? And if he doesn't, I don't think he finishes inside the top 12. Number 16, we got Greg Dulcich to close out tier number 6 of the Broncos. Underdog ADP, tight end 15, pick 148.4. Tight end 30 last year in half PPR, 16 in points per game, 10 games played with 6 starts, 55 targets, 5.5 per game, number 26, 33 receptions, 3.3 per game, 27th, 411 receiving yards, 41.1 per game, 24th, and 2 total touchdowns, 32nd, 19.1% dominated rating, 11th, and 12.5 yards per reception, 9th. I liked Albert Aquabonum going into last season. He was not the answer. It was Greg Dulcich. The guy has a crazy looking hairdo. Question is this guy a Hackett guy? Or is this guy going to work with Peyton and it's really Russell Wilson's guy? That's a question I have because they changed coaches. And that's enough to move him down here to tier 16. When he was playing, this guy had some real spark, some real pizzazz, some real upside for fantasy football. But the worries revolve around the quarterback and the change of head coach. Moving now to tier number 7. Basically, if you're drafting any of these tier number 7 guys, you need to light a vigil to the fantasy gods before you draft them to hope that these guys work out. Irv Smith of the Bengals, underdog ADP, tight end 17, pick 149.6. 46th at tight end last year and 24 in points per game. 8 games played with Minnesota and 1 start. The stats aren't great, obviously, because Hawkinson took over by the time he got healthy. 36 targets, 4.5 per game, 25 receptions, 3.1 per game, 182 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. He didn't even qualify for efficiency stats because he didn't play enough games. Now he goes to the Bengals, loaded Bengals offense. You draft him because you're talking yourself into the fact that this guy's going to score a touchdown every couple of games and score you like 15 points. Or if maybe one of the receivers gets hurt, knock on wood, Irv Smith elevates his target share. You're just drafting a tight end because he's on a good team. I've also been an Irv Smith guy in the past. Let's be honest, he hasn't really shown too much in the NFL. Number 18, we got Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills, tight end 11, pick 118.6, 25th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. 12 games played at Utah in 2022, 70 receptions on 96 targets for 890 yards, 21.7% target share, 72.9% catch rate, and 8 receiving touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid is being pumped up heavily. There's already reports, like Dorsey's talking about, we're not sure what Kincaid's going to be in this offense. You're not sure what Kincaid is going to be in this offense. He's a tight end. How many targets is this guy going to get? Is he going to play a lot, or did we just get bamboozled and we're going to see a bunch of Dawson Knox? Right? Like, cool, he's on the Bills. There's definitely competition around him, though. Not quite as high on Kincaid as others. I get it in best ball. You're hunting for that crazy upside. The Bills. Let's be honest, though. It might even take some time for him to see some significant usage on the field to even want to start him weekly, especially early on as a rookie. Tier 7, Gerald Everett of the Chargers, underdog ADP, tight end 20, pick 164.5. There's another guy you draft. He's on a good offense. Played decent last year, tight end 15 in PPR. In half PPR, 10 and 17 in points per game, 16 games played with 11 starts. He was 8th in targets, 8th in receptions, 11th in receiving yards, 12th in touchdowns, 53.3% contested catch rate. He was all right last season. They also draft Quentin Johnston. If Allen Williams and Quentin Johnston stay healthy and Eckler stays healthy, like, how many fucking mouths do you have to feed there? It's a lot in LA. Closing out tier number 7, tight end number 20, Tyler Conklin of the Jets, underdog ADP, tight end 24, pick 194, tight end 16, half PPR, 22 in points per game. Really don't understand why he's ranked so low. On underdog, number 24, he's my tight end 20. You could even talk yourself into moving him up higher to maybe even 17. 87 targets in 17 games, number 8, 58 receptions, 8th, 550 receiving yards, 12th, 3 touchdowns, 20th, 16.8% dominator ratings, 19th. That's with Mike White, Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco. Now, Aaron Rodgers isn't necessarily some guy who just loves the tight end, right? But he's a better quarterback than all of those guys combined. So I think Conklin should have another decent year, right? He was good in 2021, good in 2022. The process of thinking here, patterns, he should be pretty good in 2023 as well. So thank you guys all for watching. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great guys' day. Make sure you check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description. I love you guys all. And as always, good boy!